All right, I want you to imagine something. You're a Roman senator. Your family name? It's legendary. Tonight, you've got an invitation to the emperor's palace. Now that should be an honor, right? Something to fill you with pride. But as you're climbing those huge marble steps, your stomach is just churning with dread. The guards, they won't even meet your eyes. And the air, it's thick with incense, sure, but also with fear. This is the story of how one man, the Emperor Caligula, turned the very seat of power into a theater of utter horror. Let's get into it.
So it all starts with this, a golden invitation. But this isn't an honor. It feels more like a summons. For the elite of Rome, you see, an evening with the emperor wasn't some privilege you got to enjoy. No, it was an ordeal. An ordeal you had to survive. You arrive at the heart of the entire empire, the Palatine Hill. But you have to understand, this isn't just a home, it's a stage. It's a place where power is absolute, and every single guest, well, you're just a potential prop in the emperor's twisted games. It's like the very walls were holding their breath, waiting to see what happens next. Inside the Great Hall, dozens of Rome's most powerful people are just standing there, in this deeply uncomfortable silence. And then you hear it, this manic laughter echoing down a corridor. Emperor Caligula enters, and his eyes, they're bright with this almost predator-like intensity. He looks around and announces, "My dear friends, tonight we shall see just how far you'll go to prove your loyalty. The show is about to begin."
But to really understand the monster that Caligula became, we have to go back. We have to understand the boy he was and the incredible hope he once represented for all of Rome. Because, believe it or not, before all the madness, there was the promise of a golden age.
And this is where it gets so fascinating. He starts out as Caligula, which means little boots. It was this cute nickname from his father's army. He was their mascot. But his youth, it was basically a masterclass in survival. He had to watch as the paranoid Emperor Tiberius systematically eliminated his entire family, his father, his mother, his brothers, all picked off one by one. So he learned to hide, to lie, to do whatever it took to survive in a world where any sign of weakness meant certain death. And that's why when he finally takes power at just 24, Rome doesn't see a deeply traumatized young man. No, they see a savior, the son of a hero who was going to end the years of terror.
And for about 7 months, Caligula was everything Rome had dreamed of. He was generous, he was just, the people loved him. But then he falls desperately ill. Ancient sources call it a brain fever. All of Rome prayed for him to get better. Well, they got their wish, but the man who woke up was not the same one who had fallen sick.
And this just perfectly illustrates the change. I mean, look at this. The first 7 months were a dream come true. He brought back political exiles, he held massive public games, everybody adored him. But after the sickness, the shift was total. Erratic decisions spiraled into just unspeakable cruelty. The beloved leader became a corrupt, monstrous tyrant. It's like the thin veneer of sanity had just been completely stripped away.
So here's the crucial thing that happened. During that brush with death, Caligula seems to have had this terrifying epiphany. As emperor, he wasn't just powerful, he was limitless. He realized he could do literally anything to anyone, and there would be zero consequences. That intoxicating realization didn't just tweak his personality, it unleashed the monster that his traumatic childhood had been building for years.
And this brings us back to his palace and how his terror became so systematic. See, Caligula's reign wasn't just about random acts of cruelty. Oh no, he developed a system. He weaponized sex and desire to literally dismantle the fabric of Roman society, and he used his own home as the laboratory for it all.
He followed this chillingly methodical blueprint. It wasn't enough to just physically harm his enemies. He had to utterly break their spirit. So he'd target a respected family, force their wives and daughters into sexual submission, and this was the absolute key to it all. He'd compel the husbands, fathers, and brothers to watch. This was never about pleasure for him. This was about destroying a family's honor, their past, their future, all in one single horrifying night.
I mean, can you even imagine the psychological torture? During a lavish dinner party, Caligula might just turn to a senator in front of all his peers and casually say something just like this. The attack was public. The humiliation was absolute. And that senator had to just sit there, powerless, as his wife was led away, knowing that any kind of protest meant death for his entire family. He was made a participant in his own degradation. And he physically transformed the palace to accommodate all of this. He built special chambers designed for group sex, and even a small amphitheater with raised seating where he would stage these performances for a captive audience of senators. His own bedroom had viewing areas, and most horrifically, he established a brothel right there inside the palace walls, staffed not by slaves, but by the wives and daughters of his political enemies.
But this corruption wasn't just personal, it was institutional. Look at this. He perverted the very foundations of Roman life. During official Senate meetings, while husbands were debating law, he would demand sexual services from their wives. He declared himself a living god and made sexual acts a required form of worship. Even his own weddings became nothing more than a stage for publicly humiliating yet another noble family.
It even morphed into a form of economic terrorism. Caligula basically created this grotesque marketplace. If you were a wealthy noble, your family's safety, your property, your very life depended on providing your wives and daughters for the emperor's private audiences. He even set up a formal tax where families were required to provide their women for service in the palace, and the amount of time they served was determined by the family's wealth. It was sexual slavery, plain and simple, imposed on the most privileged class in the empire.
And the psychological damage was generational. The women were either broken, forced into prostitution, or driven to suicide. The men were made accomplices in their own family's destruction, their honor and authority just shattered forever. And the children, they were forced to watch, and sometimes even participate. They grew up with their entire understanding of relationships and sexuality completely warped, ensuring Caligula's corruption would outlast his own life.
A reign of terror this intense just couldn't last. It was impossible. Eventually, the very people tasked with protecting the emperor decided they simply could not take any more. But assassinating Caligula didn't just magically erase the deep, psychological wounds he'd inflicted on Rome.
The breaking point came in the year 40. After years of escalating depravity, Caligula announced his ultimate plan, to make his sexual cult the official religion of the entire Roman Empire. This threat, to force every single citizen into his rituals, that was the final straw. On January 24th, 41 CE, he was assassinated by his own Praetorian Guard. And for many of those assassins, it wasn't just political. It was deeply, deeply personal. They were avenging their own families.
Now, what happened next is just as telling. The new emperor Claudius, he ordered that much of the evidence of Caligula's crimes be destroyed. But here's the thing. It wasn't to protect Caligula's memory. It was to protect his victims from any further public shame. This created what was essentially a conspiracy of silence. Survivors couldn't speak out without destroying their own family's reputation. And so the historical records, they had to use coded, cautious language, hiding the full, horrifying truth from us.
So here's the key takeaway. Caligula's true legacy isn't found in the ruins of his palace. It's not written in marble or bronze. It's written in the generational trauma he inflicted. A terrifying blueprint for how a tyrant can use sexual violence, not just to hurt individuals, but to destroy an entire society from the inside out.
And that leaves us with a question that echoes from his ruined palace right down to our modern world. Caligula's story is, thankfully, an extreme example, but it serves as this timeless, terrifying warning. It forces us all to ask, what really happens when power has no limits and humanity has no voice?